Hey fellow settlers of a fantasy land, it's a me, Mario. And today we're gonna talk still about Terra and about sun worshippers in detail. So, I think this might be the best faction in the game, along with maybe another one we're going to discuss in the future. Why are they this good? Why are they this strong? We're gonna see it now. So their main power is starting off with 3 dwellings compared to the normal 2 dwellings. And they have 2 palaces. The left one will give them a terraforming action that doesn't count as a spade action, but that can terraform any terrain into their home terrain, which is yellow, the desert. And the only thing that is a bit weird about this palace is that it cannot be used with navigation because the ability is called Sandstorm, if I'm not mistaken. So of course you cannot use it over water, and you cannot use it on the other side of a bridge. So these are the only 2 limitations. But as far as everything else is concerned, it's like terraforming without using spades directly into your home terrain. So it doesn't matter how far it is. So blue, green, they're all good. Red and black. And the right one is the same one that all the other A faction get, which makes it so that it's easier to form a city. It requires 6 PowerPoint or whatever they're called now in Terra, which makes it a bit easier to form towns. Now, why is this faction this strong? We're gonna see it down the line, but you might already guess something from this power, which is really good, and the starting 3 dwellings. The yellow hexes are, in my opinion, really well positioned on the board. You have many possible starting positions depending on who you're playing against, and the left palace makes it so that a lot of stretches like this one and this one, which would be pretty bad for yellow in general, become incredibly good just because you just need to use Sandstorm once and then you get access to 2 hexes. Especially over here is very good because you also get a third yellow hex down here. Remember also that in Terra Nova, building bridges is comparatively better than in Terra Mystica. You're gonna use more bridges just because there are all the patches of terrains are not as big as in Terra Mystica on average. So you're gonna advance navigation a lot and you're gonna use bridges quite a bit. So where does yellow normally start? It depends a lot on the other factions in the game. For example, this hex is very good when you're playing with against black, for example. Against green is also pretty good. It's a bit sketchy when you're against red, just because it's gonna be a bit harder to get a connection for you, because they will normally get navigation 1 and reach both these axes, and they will also terraform this green one over here, and you need the palace to get it for cheap. So normally you have some struggles with connection if you start over here and there's red in the game, but otherwise this one is pretty good. It's not that good with blue, just because blue will start over here and terraform down here. So if you're against both red and blue, this position is very risky. Unless you're sure you're going to get a spade before a blue to get down here, you're better off using other position probably. But yeah, this stretch is pretty decent. This one can be decent depending if green is in the game. If green is in the game, it can be a bit tricky because sometimes green chooses to go over here and not just down here. But it depends. Sometimes it can work even with green just because you can get them a lot of power, so they will let you build over here with the palace. It's just a bit slower. Normally blue doesn't start over here. Starting in a landlocked hex is normally not that good of an idea in Terra Nova in my opinion. But this stretch is good for the regions I mentioned earlier. Down here is also a very good stretch for you, just because you don't even need a palace. This one is just 1 spade away. But again, it depends who you're playing against. If you're playing against an experienced green player, I would say that it's very easy for both of you to cooperate down here, because even though green could go down here, that's actually not that convenient for them. It's better to go over here and reach the other green hex, so they just use 2 spades to get 4 hexes, which is very good. And they can cooperate with you pretty easily because you're gonna feed each other power down here. So you can get power from them, they get power from you, you both get cheap trading posts. So I would say that on average, if you're against green, this is a very good idea to build down here. It can also work against both blue and black, just because normally they expand on this direction over here. So you can get a city over here. The thing is, if you're against black especially, it might be tricky to get connection. This hex is probably the single most important one for yellow to get connection. The thing is, it's not that great early on to start with a dwelling over there, just because it's not easy to get adjacency over there. Blue rarely starts here in my opinion, and red rarely starts here. It's a bit weird because as a position it can be good, but most of the time I don't see this starting position from red and blue. We're gonna talk about them a bit more when we're gonna talk about the red factions and the blue factions. But let's say that normally in Terra Mystica you see the center and you think that players will be there. Here the center is more over here and over here, sometimes over here too. This hex can be good, but it's very risky in my opinion. It's very risky because it's landlocked, and if you get stuck getting inside, it can be a problem. It can be good because you have some kind of a natural city. You see our neighbors are red and black, so with 2 spades you can get 4 hexes in both directions. It's just that depending on the faction you're playing against, especially if you're playing against black, it can be a bit tricky, but the fact that you can go both ways make it so that sometimes it's a reasonable hex to start on. It's not my favorite. Again, normally I try to start over here, and over here. But again, depending on where the other players are placing their dwellings, it can be good. Also remember that the good thing, a very strong thing about starting with 3 dwellings is not only that you start with 3 dwellings, which is incredibly good in this game, way better than comparatively speaking in Terra Mystica, because here you have less rounds but a stronger economy right at the start means you can invest a bit less in economy and you can start ranking off points. And comparatively speaking, you have a slower game with less overall economy, so starting already with 3 positions on the board is pretty good. You're controlling more areas, etc, etc. So I think that comparatively speaking this is better, and also yellow hexes are in way better position here than on the base map for Terra Mystica, which is something that is holding yellow back on the base map in Terra Mystica. I think most players would agree with that. So yeah, I was saying that not only you get 3 dwellings, but you get to place the 3rd one after everybody else has placed their 2 dwellings. So you can be pretty flexible and adapt to whatever they're doing. You can go to safe spots depending on the color pairings and color matches, and then eventually build down here if you think if you think it's a gamble that can work. Let's just say that. Okay. I've been talking a lot about the map. Again, remember that sometimes connecting is not easy. Again, I think some worshippers are in the top 2 strongest factions of Terra Nova. Just remember that they also have strengths and weaknesses, as we're going to see, and they are the faction, in my opinion, that care the most about getting lots of cities, at least 2, but a lot of the time 3 can work pretty well with them, just because they get a jump start both in terms of economy and of spaces already occupied on the map. It works better in 3 players, of course, getting 3 cities. In 4 it can be a bit sketchy, but also they care a lot about connection, because they are definitely a very economic faction. You can play them to score right from the start, but they work better if you can build a strong economy with them, in my opinion. So remember that. So connection is very important for them. It's way more important for other factions. There are some factions that I wouldn't say don't care, but in 4P, yeah, maybe they just don't care because they know that they cannot compete with the other factions, so they will focus on other scoring areas. But you really need to at least contest connection. So there's that. So strength, well, income-wise, they are a fairly average faction. They get the 333 2211 income on dwellings, which is what you're gonna see on most factions. They get 2222 2121 on trading posts, which is definitely average. There are better factions, but there are also worse factions. So I would say that overall they're pretty decent. They get a very strong left palace, as we've seen. I think that in most games with the Sun Worshippers, you want the palace built early on. So you would like to build it on the second round, probably ideally, but also on the third can work pretty well. Fourth and fifth are a bit sketchier because you really, really, really want it. It's just that strong, getting a free spade or maybe even a free 2 spades each and every round. It's pretty strong. The other palace goes pretty well with their main plan. Again, with other A factions, you don't get the same luxury. For example, spoiler alert, with golems, you're not really focusing on scoring a lot and on building 2 cities even in every game. So the right palace feels a bit out of place, but with some worshippers, the right palace works so well with their main plan of expanding and building 2/3 cities. So I think it's pretty good. In my opinion, it should be built only if you're going for 3 cities. But again, with some worshippers, I find myself doing that pretty often. So that's definitely part of the strength. Also remember that starting with 3 dwellings, it means that they can be very flexible with their openings regarding round bonuses. They can follow pretty closely most of the early round bonuses because they don't lose any economy in going for trading post early on. You can easily, you can see that you have a bit more coins than the average faction. You start with 16 instead of the average 15, which makes it so that if you're the starting player and you get the 7 coins actions, for example, that would make 16 plus 7, that's 23. You can go for the palace on round 1, which can work. It's not always the best, but actually it can work, and you're not losing much in terms of economy because you're still going to have 2 dwellings built, so you're still gonna get 6 coins. You can also start by building 2 TPs and 1 dwelling, and you're still having a pretty balanced economy. So they are very, very flexible already at the start, and it's something that I really like of them. That said, they still have their weaknesses. They definitely want round bonuses that help with a strong economy. So like all these round bonuses are not great for them, for example. They can be worse if the second one was TPs. They definitely don't like 2 rounds in a row with TPs, in my opinion. Most factions don't, but some of the factions have plans to use that TPs in a good way. They like a lot when dwellings are... there are round bonuses like dwellings, TPs, or TPs, dwelling, TPs. They can build easily out a lot, especially if they have already built their palace, and they can expand easily with economy. So they don't like repeated subsequent round bonuses. They like them to be a bit spaced out. And they definitely don't like these 2 or even the spades round bonuses close to the end of the game, just because they are not easy to use economically wise. So if you build a strong economy, you want something to explode in the late game, like dwellings or especially cities. Sun worshippers love cities in the 4th and 5th round. Even on the 4th round, they sometimes can build up 3 cities on the 4th round. So I would say that they are the best faction to abuse a late game city scoring round. And these two are not really great because there's a fixed amount of things you can get out of them. Yes, with this one you can upgrade 3 times. I mean, this one is not great for anybody, but they really need to explode in the late game, in my opinion, and this is not great. That said, they can work even in this kind of setup just because they are so flexible and so good. So, they would like to get something to reward them for their economy in the late game. That is kind of a weakness, I would say. Uh, Main plan, flexible versus rigid. I think that we've already said everything that is there to say about this faction. They are very flexible. They can do a lot of stuff. They can also play the point game instead of the economic game. But of course, they work better while playing an economic game. As far as the round boosters are concerned, they love all of the, once again, economic one, especially the dwellings one. All the economical factions love the dwelling ones, but they can work with all of them. I mean, again, they are very flexible. They like the palace one too, just because they are going to build an early palace most of the time. So this is good. This is good. All the economic ones are pretty good because once again they help snowballing them into the late game. So there's not that much to say about them just because they are a bit of a generic faction. So it sucks a bit that they are one of the best factions. This is part of the reason for which I would like so much to get auction on BGA for Terra Nova. But it is what it is. Just remember that this faction is the deal, so just take it and use it most of the time. I think in like probably 90% of the games you're going to see Sun Worshippers picked first or second by good players. So they're just a very, very, very strong and flexible faction. Keep that in mind and you're gonna see your win rate explode or just become a bit higher, realistically. Alright, that's it. I would say that is it for Sun Worshippers. See you next time. Mario's out. Bye bye.